It is not the descent toward the shadow, nor the rise toward the light that makes us superior. It is the endless struggle between the two that the greatness of character lies. We are tested, and we do not break. We will never fall. This was said by Sanguinius. Hello, and welcome back to the Wisdom of Warhammer channel. And in today's video, I'll be going over the history of the Blood Angels Legion. I will go over their time during the Great Crusade before Sanguinius was found, and then their time during the Great Crusade after Sanguinius was found. I will then talk about their time during the Horus Heresy, and then I will finish up with how they were structured as a legion. Like in my previous videos, I do not own the artwork in the video, and all things Warhammer are owned by Games Workshop and Black Library. So, with the intro out of the way, let's get the video started, shall we? In the later years of the Unification Wars, as the Proto-Legions were building their legendary status, the 9th Legion was barely mentioned, only in hushed whispers and grim rumors. The reason for this was because the 9th Legion had built a reputation within the Imperial military as a tide of butchers that slaughtered the mutant hordes of the Rad Wastes of Terra. The 9th Legion rarely served alongside other legions, and some remaining Thunder Warriors in the vanguard, and were labeled as sharp blades while standing next to the sledgehammer of Imperial military. They were not conquerors. They were butchers that consumed everything in their path as they grew more and more during this time in Imperial history. They could not be controlled, only pointed towards their new prey, and you may assume that they must have the faces of demons. But that is not true. They were as beautiful as angels. But they may have been as beautiful as angels, but deep down they were monsters, and those who saw the aftermath of their battle saw them consume the flesh of their enemy, gaining new knowledge. Space Marines have an organ called the omophagia, which allows the Marine to consume the DNA, RNA, and proteins of their enemies as well as their memories. They consumed every corpse that they came across after battle, and when they had new Marines in combat, those Marines would consume the flesh of the more experienced Marines, of those who died in combat, and they would gain the knowledge and skills of that dead Marine. From this kind of ritual of corpse eating, they would gain the name the Eaters of the Dead, and those who looked upon these beautiful warriors feasting upon the enemy, they would be horrified. Also, these Marines would consume the flesh of the dead brother. They would bear his name and then become like him, almost like the dead never died, only changed appearances. While the Emperor was dealing with the more pressing war zones on Terra, he knew that the war hordes of mutants would bother him, so the first line of defense was the 9th, and they did it alone and unnoticed for years. Like I said a little bit ago, they fought in the highly irradiated places, as well as the places that suffered the most from chem weapons during the Old Night. The 9th recruited from these tribes of mutants and the horde of people that followed them in reverence, and turned these dispossessed and broken boys and made them into angels. This fate was no accident. It was what the Emperor created them to be, because each legion had a role in his new Imperium. The apothecaries of the 9th did not rest in creating more legionaries, because the Rad Wastes were a meat grinder, and they needed to keep the Legion going, otherwise they would go extinct. They did create a cult in their wake that followed them, and they were called the Cult of the Reborn, and the members were called the Red Brothers. These Red Brothers spread the word of the 9th Legion, and from this created an aura of mysticism around the legionaries of the 9th. They brought order to the horde of mutants that followed the Legion, and from this allowed them to gain power, and it also allowed more recruits into the 9th Legion. When the Emperor enforced the ban of religion through the introduction of the Imperial Truth, and due to the religious theme of the cult, the 9th Legion massacred the entire cult and their followers. When the legions then went to the Sol system, the Ninth Legion was sent out to the moons of Neptune, and this was out of range of Imperial supply lines. These moons of Neptune were not as important, so the more violent legion would have to deal with it, while the more disciplined legions dealt with the more vital places in the inner worlds. The moons of Neptune had mutant war clans that needed to be held at bay, while the Emperor dealt with the more important places, so the Emperor sent the Ninth Legion to die. 12,000 legionaries of the Ninth, which was the entire legion, were sent to kill everything and die for the future of the Imperium. And shortly after the Ninth Legion began their campaign, the other Imperial forces lost contact with them. After the inner worlds were conquered, the Emperor then set his sights on the outer worlds, and when Imperial forces arrived at Neptune, they were surprised. They found out that the Ninth Legion had survived their suicide mission against the mutant hordes of Neptune, and they actually took recruits in from these tribes. And from this trial, the Ninth Legion had been reborn as an even more brutal and bloody beast. During their time being stranded on Neptune, they began to do bloody rituals during combat, which consisted of them feasting upon their enemies in front of them, which caused horror upon their enemies, breaking their morale. When there was a threat that required bloody close combat, the Ninth Legion would be sent again and again, and they would win battles where other legions saw defeat and despair. Malcador saw the records of the quiet black battlefields of the Kuiper Belt and the endless wastes of Russ, and gave them the name the Revenant Legion. The Sigillite felt uncomfortable about the Ninth Legion during their early service due to their record and how the Legion acted. The only legion that they had close kinship with was the 12th Legion, which was named the Warhounds because both were the same, but the Warhounds were a bit more disciplined military force. Even though Malcador did not like this kind of warrior, he remembered that the monsters that they would encounter would need to be fought by their own monsters, and the 9th Legion were the Imperium's monsters. Also, these gore-covered warriors would set the foundation for the Imperium in the galaxy, and even though there were never songs that praised them, the Emperor would be grateful for their service. Remembrancers and iterators learned the rituals of the Ninth and saw that certain names of the Ninth would have longevity. The Ninth gained another name, the Immortal Ninth, because they saw that some of the legionaries never died, so to speak, but these names would have a long history of bloody and gore-covered deeds. One of these famous names was the Legion Master named Isidore Soros. Even though the original Isidore was killed, the name carried on to the next Legion Masters throughout the early history of the Ninth. Due to them being this way, they would be forced to isolate from other legions and the Imperial Guard to prevent conflict. The Primarchs who were found before Sanguinius saw the Ninth as distrustful and showed disdain from their practices, but they saw the Legion's need. Sanguinius was found on the moon of Bal Secundus as the leader of the human tribes that lived there, and for 3 years he learned under his brother Horus, and he met his legion on the storm-racked world of Tegahar. As the entire 9th Legion was gathered, which took 2 years and 4 solar months, they all awaited the reason why their entire legion was called. With them all grim-faced and becoming impatient, a trio of Thunderhawks arrived that bore the Luna Wolf's icon, and within the main Thunderhawk held Sanguinius. When the Revenant Legion saw their Primarch, they felt hope and joy, and when Sanguinius spoke to them, he did something that no Primarch had done before. He kneeled before his sons. Instead of him demanding their allegiance, he offered them his own allegiance, and this surprised his sons, and from being reunited, it gave them a boost in morale. Sanguinius fought alongside his sons on the same planet he met them on. He led from the front, and he and his sons slaughtered the abhuman hordes like it was a butcher shop. Sanguinius then found a pelt from a beast called a Carnodon, and wore it as a trophy and as a symbol for his new alliance and allegiance with his sons. One thing that showed during this battle was that the Blood Angels would show a spark of nobility, and their martial pride and determination would show that they would fight even if there was a small chance of victory. After the battle at Tegahar, the Blood Angels and their Primarch served alongside their cousins in the 16th Legion, and I will talk about it. For a few years, a company of Blood Angels would fight alongside a company of Little Wolves. This kind of setup would deepen the bond of the 9th and 16th Legions, and their Primarchs would have a deeper relationship. And this made the two legions a formidable fighting force. The Blood Angels also lost their brutal and gore-covered identity and became beacons of hope for all Imperial forces during battles. And they would cut back on the more gory rituals, but they would still drink blood. Instead of the bloody monsters their Primarch had turned them into the exemplars of the Imperial Creed, and were equal to Horus and the Little Wolves. Then when they left the Little Wolves, they still learned from their battles. For example, they learned brotherhood while fighting alongside the Imperial Fists and Rogel Dorn. On the planets of Cambrol and Perhalt, they learned discipline against Eldari Reavers, and on the planet of Kentaurus Beta, they learned mercy during their fight against the human colonies they fought against. Each battle that they fought, they learned to liberate themselves from their old ways, and they turned their fiery fury into wisdom, and their hunger for blood lessened as they became more disciplined. When they were ready, the entire Legion went to Baal for the first time to meet with the new novices of the Legion from the human tribes of the Rad Wastes. The Blood Angels also had built the Arx Angelicum, which was their fortress monastery and would be a symbol of hope for the hopeless people. Also, while they rested in between combat, they would pick up a passion, and they would have sculptures. Some would forge beautiful artifacts and read, and from these passions, it would allow them to tame the thirst even more. There were Blood Angels that fell back into the old ways of the Legion, and they would either be put down at the orders of Sanguinius, or they would be locked away from the eyes of others. As time went on, the Blood Angels built bonds of brotherhood with other legions like the White Scars, and they had been possibly the most noble of the legions. With Sanguinius at the head of the Legion, they fought for the bright future of humanity, and the Great Angel and the Ninth were the souls of the Imperial Dream. Going into one of the many battles that the Blood Angels fought in during the Great Crusade, we have the War in an Anactor system, which was wiped off the face of the galaxy by the 9th Legion and their father. The only records of this battle are buried deep in the Imperial Palace's archives and in the minds of the Blood Angels that fought in this brutal war, but I have read these records. This war was so brutal and bloody that those who saw the war thought that the old Revenant Legion had returned due to the brutality and gory close combat. It all started when an Imperial scout fleet stumbled upon this system, and they were immediately fired upon and heavily damaged and retreated from these hostile humans. This fleet ran into Sanguinius and his massive war fleet of Blood Angels, and they changed course and checked out this new system, and were fired upon just like the scout fleet. The 9th Legion fought back, pushing them back to one of their planets, and saw that there was a garrison of Anactori warriors. Eager to fight, the Blood Angels' fleet bombarded the planet. Then the companies of the 19th, 67th, 171st, and 94th were ordered to destroy this garrison, and they were successful for some time, but then the warriors called the Iron Bulls held them back. These Iron Bulls held for 6 hours but were killed in the end, but other Iron Bulls would wage ambushes and feign retreats across the asteroid bases in the system. During the Battle of Anactor Median, the advance of 9 companies of the Blood Angels was halted, which made them respect these Iron Bulls, and from this, the Great Angel also felt this, and he then ordered a ceasefire. He wanted to talk to these people because he respected them, but the thing is that the Anactorian people took advantage of this kindness of the Great Angel and attacked the Blood Angels. The Blood Angels' fleet was damaged and fought back and proceeded to make their way to the main homeworld of these humans, and it would be a bloodbath. This battle required the Angels' Tears, which were the destroyer squads of the Ninth, and this act showed that Sanguinius was not messing around, because he rarely used these squads. Drop pods fell from the sky, and this would be bloody and gory because the Blood Angels would commit a horrifying massacre, and this showed a dark side of the Great Angel and his sons. Sanguinius fought his way to the leaders of Anactor, while his sons ripped and tore through the defenses, while the destroyer squads did what they did best, and this world was covered in blood. The destroyers used phosphex and rad weapons which melted the skins and bones of their enemies. They reduced the world to ruins, and the civilians that survived then became serfs for the Legion. Sanguinius was drenched in blood and gore, looking like a true Blood Angel. He slaughtered the leaders of the Anactor government by cutting them down and lifting them and dropping them. He killed the final leader, who was the high ruler of this human empire, and he dragged him and showed the ruler the remains of his burning empire. He also showed him the wrath of the emperor and the price for his own treachery, and then he ripped them to pieces and then watched the flames of ruin. All veterans of the Blood Angels who served in the Revenant Legion fell back into their old ways of combat during this final battle, and those Imperial personnel who knew the history of the Ninth realized that they were still capable of being these monsters again. During the height of the Great Crusade, thousands of worlds were brought into the Imperium, and the beacons of hope were the Great Angel and his Blood Angels, and from this they had a lot of remembrancers. They fought in the most noble campaigns against the Dark Beasts, bringing light to the lost worlds of humanity, and from these campaigns, the other legions grew to respect the Blood Angels. The Blood Angels and their Primarch fought in other war zones while the Ulnar Crusade was going on, but they were present at the coronation of the War Master. But I'll be going over some of the lesser known wars that the Blood Angels fought in, starting with the Melchior Compliance. There's not much info on this compliance, but it was against the Xenos race called the Nephilim that had consumed the people of the planet, and the Blood Angels and Little Wolves had killed all Xenos in a joint campaign. The planet of Muspel was conquered by the Ninth Legion, but eventually the Dark Angels and their Primarch Lionel Johnson fought a Crave infestation here. The Blood Angels defended a planet called Helioret against insane Eldar witches of the craft world Magic Synthrali, with the aid of the Ordo Sinister, and this resulted in the destruction of the craft world. In the Prylex campaign, there was a small force of Blood Angels that was led by First Captain Ralderon, alongside a force of Imperial Fists led by Captain Casmus, and a force of Emperor's Children led by Lord Commander Idiom. The Emperor's Children force struggled in the beginning of the Praxil campaign, even though they planned it, but with the arrival of the Blood Angels and Imperial Fists, they would begin to take ground. After this campaign, the Emperor's Children Lord Commander left before he was given the blade of the last tyrant of the Praxil system. Instead, this blade was given to the first Captain Ralderon of the Blood Angels. The last war they fought before the Horus Heresy would begin was on the planet of Murder, and this required three legions, but a company of Blood Angels under the command of Kittis Thum discovered this planet. This company of Blood Angels were slaughtered, but they sent out a distress signal, and a small fleet of Emperor's Children, led by Lord Commander Eidolon, answered. The Third Legion force found the bodies of their cousins and fought against the Xenos race that killed them, which were named the Mega Arachnids. Eventually Fulgrim and his fleet arrived, and then Horus arrived with his legion, and then the Great Angel arrived alongside his fleet. The Blood Angels received the remains of the company and prepared for war, which would become a Scorched Earth war. The assault squads of the Blood Angels alongside their cousins committed genocide against the Mega Arachnids, and after the battle, the human/Xenos interstellar empire called the Interrex arrived to talk to the Imperials. The Great Angel and his sons then left while Horus talked to the Interrex and fought in a war that we don't have info on, but it was near the end of the Crusade, and the Horus Heresy would begin soon after. The first battle that the Blood Angels would fight in the Horus Heresy would be in the Cygnus system, which had 7 planets and 15 moons. This would be a horrifying battle for Sanguinius and his sons, because this would be the first time they fought against demons, mostly against the Pleasure Hosts of Slaanesh and the Blood Legions of Khorne. When the 9th Legion arrived in system, the Chaos energies assaulted the Navigators and Astropaths, which killed a lot of them and drove the serfs and regular humans insane. It was so bad that even some legionaries went insane, but they recovered and prepared for war against this unknown force. They fought against the greater demon of Slaanesh named Kyrese the Perverse, and were able to fight them on the planet of Cygnus Prime, and sadly this would not last long. Because the Bloodthirster named Kabunda and a Blood Legion of Bloodletters began to fight the Blood Angels, and this triggered the Black Rage, which was a dark side of the Great Angel and the Blood Angels. They went mad during the battle, and Sanguinius was knocked down by the Bloodthirster, and when his sons tried to reach him, Kabunda killed 500 Blood Angels in one strike. From this psychic backlash from the death of 500 Blood Angels, Sanguinius was knocked out and the battle was looking grim. The librarians of the Blood Angels realized that they needed to break the Edict of Nicaea to save their father, and they did. And from this, the Great Angel woke up and went to fight the Bloodthirster again. The Blood Angels, seeing their Primarch back in the fight, they had renewed vigor, and with the Black Rage receding a bit after the defeat of the Greater Demon of Khorne, they then turned their attention to the Pleasure Host of Slaanesh demons, while Sanguinius fought Kyrese the Perverse, and they would eventually purge the demons from reality. After they tended to their wounded and got systems back up, they received a message from the Primarch Rolgadorn saying to return to Terra. Without delay, they took their dead and attempted to go to Terra, while Cygnus was left rotting and their dead would be buried upon Mount Seraph on Baal. The 9th and their Primarch left the system and got lost after they attempted to go back to the Throne World. They got to the realm of the 500 worlds with the aid of the Pharos device, but they thought it was the Astronomicon. But a few jumps later, they were in front of a war fleet of the Ultramarines led by Rubute Guilliman himself, who greeted his brother and his battered legion. The Primarch of the 13th Legion led his brother to the homeworld of Guilliman, which is Macragge, and informed his angelic brother and his sons about the betrayal of Lorgar, Horus, and 6 other brothers. The 13th Primarch stated that Sanguinius was the true heir of the Emperor and the Imperium. Secundus was created, and shortly after that, the Lion and his legion arrived at Macragge. The Lion was brought up to speed, and he would be named Lord Protector of Imperium Secundus, and the first threat they needed to deal with was the Night Haunter Conrad Kurz. The Blood Angels didn't really do much here, but they did assist in the hunt for the Primarch of the 8th Legion, but eventually the Lion would bring him in chains to face judgment after some time, and a few close calls. Sometime after the Lion came back to Macragge after being banished for doing horrible things to find Kurz, he told his brothers about Kurz's visions. Hearing this info, the 3 Primarchs and their legions made their way to Davin to find a way to breach the Runestorm and make it to Terra. The Blood Angels, alongside their Primarch, went down to the Chaos-corrupted planet to find a way to go through the Runestorm. After they found a way, the Imperial fleet then launched a massive salvo of cyclonic torpedoes which destroyed the planet which started the heresy. Only the Great Angel and his entire legion were able to get through the Runestorm and make their way to Terra, while the 2 other Primarchs and their legions held the traitors back. With them getting to Terra before the traitors did make the loyalists that were stationed there and were fortifying Terra feel relieved that the 9th Legion and the Great Angel came to aid in the fight. They assisted in building of the fortifications, which was very little due to the very master of defense, Rolgadorn. Eventually, Horus and his massive traitor fleet arrived in Sol System and made their way to the Throne World to begin the siege of Terra and the final battle of the Horus Heresy. With the legions of the Blood Angels, Imperial fists, and white scars on the walls of the Imperial Palace, alongside the brave souls of the Imperial Guard, the final battle for humanity would begin. One thing was certain, and that was the Blood Angels would show no mercy and would be changed the most forever after this battle. During the Siege of Terra, the Blood Angels fought and killed upon the walls of the Imperial Palace with their Primarch at their side. There were legendary Blood Angels that were beacons of hope during this battle, legends like 1st Captain Raldoron, the Flesh Terror Nasir Amit, and Askelion of the Sanguinary Guard, and the Bringer of Sorrow, Zephon. These legends and their warriors fought the traitors back 3 times before they retreated to the Eternity Gate, and their defenses of this gate was their time to shine, so to speak. War bands of blood-crazed war leaders and smaller contingents of traitor forces alongside Chaos Titans threw themselves at the 9th Legion and their allies. To make it even more brutal, the bloodthirster Kambanda was summoned again and fought the Great Angel once again, but he was banished after Sanguinius snapped his spine on his knee. Then the Red Angel Angron himself joined the battle and killed a lot of his sons, including the Blood Angels, but he was killed by the Great Angel eventually. Realizing that the Loyalist reinforcements were nearing Terra, Horus dropped his shields on the Vengeful Spirit, but the issue is, when the battle dragged on, the warp and reality blended together. Eventually, Terra became a realm in the warp called the City. But before that, the Emperor, alongside Sanguinius and a company of Blood Angels, and Rogodorn and his Huskarls, teleported to the Vengeful Spirit, but they were separated. As the Blood Angels fought the traitors in this realm of the warp, and then most of the Blood Angels Legion, save for a few Marines like Zephon, and some others fell to the Black Rage. The reason this happened was because Horus had beaten Sanguinius and snapped his neck, and from this action, the psychic backlash triggered the Black Rage. The Blood Angels were so brutal and animalistic, they would slaughter everything in their path, and it terrified everyone, even their allies. For example, Lord Seneschal Fafnir Ron had to fight off Askelion after he ripped a World Eater and Death Guard Marine apart. But thanks to the aid of Zephon, Askelion was knocked out. The company that went with the Primarch found the corpse of their father after the Black Rage faded away during this time, and they cried when they saw their father's bloodied corpse. They were all numb to what happened, then seeing their broken father's corpse made them fall into a deep sadness. Thankfully, Rogodorn brought them back to reality. They carried the corpse of the Great Angel and brought it to the throne room, while the other Blood Angels continued to rip and tear through the retreating traitor forces with their blades, hands, and teeth. Then, after the Loyalist reinforcements arrived, the Blood Angels regrouped and licked their wounds and prepared for the next chapter. And when the chapters were created by Rabute Gilliman with the Codex Astartes, all sons of the Great Angel returned to Baal to bury their father in the Arx Angelicum, and they would rebuild and divide the Legion into 1,000 Space Marine chapters. But now, we have gotten to the end of the history of the Blood Angels Legion during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy, and now I'll be going over the structure of the 9th Legion. Starting off with the structure, we have Sanguinius at the top as the Primarch, and under him are substructures which are called the Spheres, and we will start with the first of 3 spheres. The first sphere had all the highest ranking Blood Angels, which consisted of the Immortals, also known as Seraphs, who were the personal guard of the Great Angel in the early years of the Crusade. They would not be a part of the Blood Angels companies, and they would get rid of their old names and their identity to do the work of the Great Angel without question. Think of them as the embodiments of Sanguinius, and they would be used in the most dangerous tasks upon the battlefield, and they would not speak a word of what they did to anyone and return to the first sphere ranks cleansed. The Sanguinary Guard is known as the Ikasat, or the Burning Ones. These warriors were the veterans of the Blood Angels who showed the true principles and values of the Great Angel and his personal guard, and sometimes they would serve as personal guards for other Blood Angel leaders. These golden warriors joined their father on the vengeful spirit, but all were killed in the battle, and the only one to remain was Eskelion, who would rebuild the order and help divide up the Ninth Legion. Under them are the Crimson Paladins, also known as the Kevrum, who were the Terminator elites of the Blood Angels Legion, and like other Legion Terminators, they would be used in frontline assaults. These warriors were the grim opposite of the Sanguinary Guard, and they were the bulwark and shield that wreaked havoc upon the foe. Similar to the Immortals, they would give up their old identity and take up a new one. The Burning Eyes, also known as the Afnim, had the most grim job in the Blood Angels Legion, and they would be used to keep the dark stain of the dark madness within the Legion. In simple terms, they were the secret police of the Great Angel. They had power blades called the Blades of Judgment, and from these weapons, they would carry out their job and would have the power to do what they needed to do. Now we have gotten to the darkest of the Legion, and they were called the Angel's Tears, and they are the destroyer squads of the Ninth Legion. They would be rarely used, and if they weren't using Dark Age weapons, they would be jump pack troops, and Sanguinius hated using them because it was uncontrolled destruction, and that is not what Sanguinius wanted to be. Like the other units in this first sphere, they would forsake their old names and pick up new ones, and also then would learn the new rituals and would become the true Angels of Death. Going down into the second sphere, which had the Legion Company commanders, which were named the Dominion, and the lower rank officers who were called the Arcanians. They were all skilled enough to take command in case a company commander, Dominion, had died. They had become masters of warfare and also had mastery over many disciplines like writing and music, and had more free time to think and ponder of the curse of the Legion. Now, in the third sphere, we have the Malak, which were the basic line infantry Blood Angels who just killed and obeyed orders of their officers. They did have discipline, which could control the dark side of the Blood Angel legionaries, but there were Marines that fell back into the old ways of the Revenant Legion, and they would be dealt with. In the early years of the Legion, they had 200 companies of 300 Marines due to the low recruitment rate, but in the later years with the Primarch, there were 300 companies of 500 Marines. When Blood Angels companies fought together, they would be called hosts, which served a different purpose during battles. For the Legion fleet, it was pretty big, boasting over 300 capital ships, many heavy cruisers and battleships, and 600 sub-capital ships, mostly slower gunboats and frigates. They did have armored companies, but they were used to bring the Blood Angels into close combat, and they did a lot of drop-out assaults and learned this kind of warfare from the Luna Wolves. But like the other legions, they were structured like a normal military force, but they did have some differences that I went over, but that is the structure of the Blood Angels Legion. Now we have gotten to the end of the video on the history and structure of the Blood Angels Legion during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. If you guys liked the video, hit the like button and share it with someone who would like this content. If you are new to the channel and would like to see more of it, hit the subscribe button and bell notification to be notified for when a new video comes out. I hope you guys have a good day, and I will see you in the next video, which will be on the history and structure of the Iron Hands Legion. Now I hope you guys have a good day, and this is Wisdom of Warhammer, signing off.